Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Accepted Authority podcast. I'm Greg Roworth, and I'm your host on this podcast, where we talk about the challenges of growing a consultancy practice, and specifically the answer to that and the remedy to a lot of the challenges that consultants face in growing their consultancy practice is that they are seen as commodities in the market. And the concept of strategic authority marketing is something that I often talk about, and hence the title of this podcast being The Accepted Authority, because positioning yourself as the authority in the market is really the fundamental process to start working on to avoid and correct that commodity positioning that so many consultants find themselves in. So today's topic, I want to talk about two current events. Not one of them is not really an event, I guess. It's more of an environmental situation. But the other event I'm talking about is the Tour de France. And that event happens at this time every year. But what I really enjoy about this bike riding event, the bike race, which is not a sprint, there's certainly series of sprints within the event, but it's really a marathon over about a week of various events that take place within the total event. And I want to talk about how that relates to growing a business and succeeding in business. Now, the other event, if we can call it that, is the current looming or activated environmental situation of a recession, a market recession. Now, some countries are perhaps in recession, some are apparently about to go into recession. I'm old enough to have experienced about 4 recessionary periods in my business journey over the last 30 odd years. And what I've come to experience in those events in the past has its parallels with the Tour de France. And so I want to put those two events together and talk about where I see the parallels and how you can benefit and avoid some of the ramifications of a recession if that's what you're worried about. And from what I hear, and in my contact with various consultants in the market, I do hear from some of them that they are worried about the recession, and particularly the ability to acquire new clients, but also to retain existing clients. And I hear comments like the market is very wary at the moment, or the market is cutting back on spending, or our client base is very worried about the recession affecting them, and therefore they've cut back on their spending on consulting. So what I want to really highlight with these two events, and let's talk about the Tour de France, is that the Tour de France has a lot of different challenges embedded within it, lots of different types of races that suit various types of riders, but ultimately there's one rider who emerges as the winner of that event. So the winner is the one who has the best times over all the series of events that take place within the total package of events that they have to ride in. Now, some of the races are sprint races, where people who have particular strength in sprinting, which is spending a lot of energy over a very short distance to get there quickly and powerfully. So a lot of riders aren't sprinters. They're much more suited to long distance races. So those riders that are suited to long distance races probably aren't going to win the sprint. So the sprinters have an opportunity to get ahead or get an advantage over those long distance races in those events. But really, are they going to be successful long term? They can get ahead in the sprints, but when it comes to the more challenging races, they're going to struggle. Now, a lot of the races touring around France, and if you've watched any of the TV broadcasts of those races, you enjoy the scenery that the riders are riding through in France. And you'll see that a lot of the races are on flat ground, flat roads, where it's quite easy for the riders to keep up a pace. They can ride quite within their capabilities in a lot of ways, and they can use teamwork and use strategy, use tactics to get ahead of the pack. But in those races, there's a lot of opportunity, again, for riders to excel and to get ahead of the pack. There are also races that are done through the mountains, and that is a totally different experience for the riders. And really, in the whole race, the mountains are the most challenging part of the event. And really, in the mountains is where the winners emerge. The winners of the whole Tour de France event emerge as the leaders through the mountains. They're the ones that can maintain a pace. They can actually get ahead of the pack through the mountains. Now, in the mountains, there are two types of situations, well, maybe three, because there are some flat areas in the mountains, but mostly it's uphill and it's downhill. So are the winners of the Tour de France really excelling in the downhill races? Well, yes, they are, but really they're not getting ahead when they're going downhill, because everyone has an ability to go downhill pretty quickly. And unless there's an accident, and sometimes you'll see, because of the pace of the downhill race, they will try to take a corner and they'll come a cropper. They'll skid and they'll come off the bike, and that will be pretty damaging to their chances in the race. But in the main, most of the downhill races see people going downhill very quickly, but no one really getting much advantage in the downhill section. But of course, the downhill section of a race is, if you've ever ridden a bike, is amazing. The wind rushing past you, the exhilaration of the speed of going downhill is what everyone enjoys. So if you're a bike rider at all, you are going to love the downhill sections of your rides. Everyone enjoys that. So coming back to the recession is like the uphill part of the race. We're going to have some uphill rides. We're going to have to push uphill at times in our business. And particularly when there's a recession, it's like the uphill ride. Generally, when it's not a recession, it's either like riding on the flat ground or riding downhill. And in those situations, it's very enjoyable. It's not so challenging, and we can pretty much succeed in any type of situation where it's a downhill ride for us, where customers are coming to us, where our clients are signing up and staying with us because the economy is very promising. It's very fluid and very, very strong. So what happens when the economy takes a turn for the worse? When we have to ride uphill because of a recession? Well, it becomes like the Tour de France race when the riders ride uphill. At that point, the weaker riders fall back. The riders who aren't equipped and who haven't done the preparation, who haven't done the hard yards beforehand, are the ones that fall by the wayside. That's exactly the same situation as what happens in our business. The business owners who aren't prepared, who haven't done the hard yards when the times are good, who haven't set up their businesses for success when times get hard, they're the ones who are going to fall by the wayside. They're the ones that need to be worried about the recession. But the ones who've taken the time to prepare, to build a strong business, to build effective marketing systems that don't just rely on referrals, that don't just rely on the economic situation to be positive, they're the ones that will succeed and get ahead of the pack. And my experience over the journey has been that if you're strong in business, if you have done the hard yards and built a strong, effective business, you can actually take business off the weaker ones, because while they're falling by the wayside, their potential clients are becoming available and present a magnificent opportunity for the strong in the business. So my recommendation to you is not to worry about the recession and worry about the effects it's going to have on you in a way that makes you fearful and makes you want to pull in the reins and hold on tight to just try to survive. Because if that's how you operate, you're going to be very challenged in that uphill ride. You're going to suffer from the effects of the recession. But if you take the time now, even if it's not much time until the recession really has an impact, if you take the time to look at what you're doing in business, to look at how can you do the hard yards, how can you build an effective marketing system, how can you strengthen up your relationships with your existing clients and make sure you're adding value, but also making sure they know you're adding value, because that's often a situation that clients who are not aware of the value that you're adding to them will cut you when times get hard for them. So make sure they know about the value you're adding. Don't just work on your projects, work on the relationship with your clients, because ultimately that's the key to having long-term relationships. Not just doing great work, but working on the relationship as well. But the key to it is to emerge as an authority in your market. Don't just be content to get referrals. Don't just be content to be one of the commodity operators who does the same work as every other consultant in your field. Because when times get tough, when that ride is uphill, everyone who is a commodity will be falling back. It's only the authorities in the market who are going to emerge as the market leaders, even more so. It's really a situation where when things are easy and everyone is successful, no one is actually learning how to be better. Very few people actually put attention into how can we do things better when things are going smoothly, when success is coming easily. You're just, most people, content to sit back and enjoy the ride. It's only when times get tough that the strong emerge and the need arises for looking at how can we do things better. So instead of just sitting back and enjoying the ride, look at those mountains up ahead, see that they're coming, and make sure that you're doing the preparation now. That means that you are ready for the uphill ride, where you have the strength and the stamina and the capacity to excel when times are tough, because that's really the mark of a successful business. A successful consultancy practice is built in the hard times, not just when things are easy, not when everyone's succeeding, but when it's a struggle, when times are tough, when the recession hits hard. You can look at that as an opportunity for your business to emerge as the leader, and stay with the program, stay with the uphill ride, keep persisting, keep going through the challenging times and get ahead. Because if you do the hard yards now, if you focus on how to do marketing better, if you look at how can you be more value to your clients, how can you add even more value there than you're adding now, and how can you work on that relationship with the client so that they really appreciate the value you're adding to them. You're building your defenses and the stamina and the capability to be really emerging as a leader when the times get tough. So I hope you can see the value of that analogy. Get on your bike, do the hard yards now before the hills, before the mountains come. Make sure that you're ready for the recession when the impact really hits. So that's it for the Accepted Authority episode today. My name's Greg Roworth. If you want to know more about how to prepare for the mountains, check out my website where there are plenty of resources available to learn more about how to be an authority in your market. Or check out my LinkedIn profile or my Facebook profile, depending on which one you like to go to. Just do a search for Greg Roworth. You'll find me on either of those platforms, and there's plenty of tips and valuable information for you to absorb. Or go back and check the past catalogue of the Accepted Authority episodes. We're now into our second year in presenting this podcast. We've had our 12-month anniversary last week, so our last episode, number 52, was our celebratory annual event, our birthday of this podcast. So we're now into year 2. We are doing the hard yards, and we have emerged as a leader, as the accepted authority in our field. So take some of the advice if that's what you're interested in. There's plenty that you can get from both the podcast episodes. YouTube is one that I haven't really referred to much, but you can find me on YouTube as well. So plenty of free information that I provide for you to help you excel in your practice to become the accepted authority. So that's it for the episode today. This is Greg Roworth, out.